On Liberty by John Stuart Mill quotes, On Liberty by John Stuart Mill is a foundational work that passionately advocates for the importance of individual freedom and the limits of authority. Mill's core argument revolves around the harm principle, asserting that the only legitimate reason for society or government to exercise power over an individual against their will is to prevent harm to others. The book delves into the necessity of protecting freedom of thought, speech, and action, arguing that these liberties are vital for both personal and societal growth. Through this work, Mill addresses the dangers of the tyranny of the majority and highlights the role of individuality as a driving force for progress, innovation, and human flourishing. His eloquent defense of personal liberty makes On Liberty a key text in the philosophical discourse on civil rights and political freedom. Quote 1. The struggle between liberty and authority is the most conspicuous feature in the portions of history with which we are earliest familiar, particularly in that of Greece, Rome, and England. The struggle between liberty and authority has been a defining theme throughout history, shaping societies as diverse as those of Greece, Rome, and England. In these ancient societies, liberty often meant protection against the tyranny of political rulers. Authority was generally viewed as an entity that needed to be resisted or limited. This enduring tension is key to understanding how political structures evolved and how individuals fought to safeguard personal freedoms while balancing societal control. Mill emphasizes that this tension has persisted, albeit in different forms, as the relationship between the governed and the governing has continued to evolve through time. Quote 2. The only purpose for which power can be rightfully exercised over any member of a civilized community, against his will, is to prevent harm to others. Mill asserts that the sole justification for exerting power over individuals in a civilized society is to prevent them from causing harm to others. This principle is grounded in his belief in the importance of individual sovereignty, suggesting that people should have absolute freedom over their actions, as long as these actions do not negatively impact others. Mill draws a clear line between acts that concern only the individual and those that affect others, proposing that interference is only acceptable in the latter case. His stance underscores the need for liberty and personal responsibility, while acknowledging the role of society in preventing harm to its members. Quote 3. Like other tyrannies, the tyranny of the majority was, at first, and is still vulgarly held in dread, chiefly as operating through the acts of the public authorities. Mill highlights the danger of the tyranny of the majority, which he sees as a significant threat to individual liberty. Unlike traditional tyranny exercised by rulers or authorities, the tyranny of the majority stems from the collective power of public opinion and societal norms. This form of tyranny is capable of penetrating more deeply into personal lives than governmental oppression, as it controls not just actions, but also thoughts and behaviors through social pressure. Mill emphasizes the need for safeguards against such tyranny to protect individuality and ensure that diverse voices are not silenced by the dominance of the majority. Quote 4. The only freedom which deserves the name is that of pursuing our own good in our own way, so long as we do not attempt to deprive others of theirs or impede their efforts to obtain it. According to Mill, true freedom means the ability to pursue one's own good in one's own way, as long as it does not infringe upon the rights of others. This concept of liberty emphasizes the importance of self-determination and personal autonomy, while acknowledging the equal rights of others to pursue their goals. Mill's definition of freedom thus balances individual rights with the responsibilities individuals have towards others, ensuring that one person's freedom does not become the cause of another's oppression or harm. This approach seeks to foster an environment where everyone can flourish without being restricted by others' actions or societal interference. Quote 5. Over himself, over his own body and mind, the individual is sovereign. Mill strongly advocates for individual sovereignty, stating that each person should have absolute authority over their own body and mind. This idea reflects his commitment to personal autonomy, emphasizing that individuals have the right to make decisions about their own lives without interference from others, whether it is from the state or society at large. Mill believes that only by granting individuals this kind of freedom can society enable true human flourishing, allowing each person to fully develop their own unique potential. This principle forms the foundation of his argument against the overreach of societal and governmental control into private lives. Quote 6. The peculiar evil of silencing the expression of an opinion is that it is robbing the human race, posterity, as well as the existing generation. Those who dissent from the opinion, still more than those who hold it. Mill points out that suppressing an opinion harms not only its holder, but also those who disagree with it, as well as future generations. By silencing a viewpoint, humanity loses the opportunity for intellectual growth, whether the opinion is true or false. If the opinion is true, it prevents people from discovering a potentially better understanding of the world. If it is false, it still has value in that it helps clarify the truth by being challenged. This argument highlights the collective loss that results from censorship, as it denies society the benefits that come from the open exchange and contestation of ideas. Quote 7. All silencing of discussion is an assumption of infallibility. Mill argues that to suppress a viewpoint is to assume that one's own beliefs are infallibly correct, a position that no human is capable of maintaining with certainty. He acknowledges the fallibility of all individuals and warns that by silencing others, we are disregarding the possibility that our own beliefs could be incorrect. By allowing all opinions to be heard, society acknowledges that no one can be absolutely sure of the truth, and thus fosters an environment where ideas are constantly tested, refined, or refuted. This openness to critique is essential for human progress and the pursuit of knowledge. Quote 8. The steady habit of correcting and completing his own opinion by collating it with those of others is the only stable foundation for a just reliance on it. Mill emphasizes that the only way to have justified confidence in one's beliefs is to continually test them against opposing views. He argues that true wisdom comes from an openness to critique and a willingness to revise one's views based on new arguments or evidence. Those who have undergone this process of examining their beliefs are more justified in their convictions than those who accept them without question. Mill asserts that this approach not only strengthens individual beliefs, but also contributes to a broader culture of intellectual rigor, making society as a whole more resilient to errors. Quote 9. Mankind can hardly be too often reminded that there was once a man named Socrates, between whom and the legal authorities and public opinion of his time there took place a memorable collision. Mill uses the example of Socrates to illustrate the dangers of suppressing dissenting voices. Socrates, considered one of the wisest men of his time, was condemned by the authorities of Athens for corrupting the youth and impiety. Mill points out that Socrates' persecution was a profound mistake, as it deprived society of one of its greatest moral philosophers. This example serves as a warning that the suppression of unconventional opinions often results in the loss of valuable insights that could benefit humanity. By allowing all voices to be heard, society ensures that it does not repeat the errors of the past and lose its most important thinkers. Quote 10. The peculiar evil of silencing the expression of an opinion is that it is robbing the human race, posterity, as well as the existing generation. Mill argues that silencing an opinion does harm not only to those who currently hold the belief, but also to future generations who might benefit from exposure to a diversity of ideas. By suppressing a viewpoint, society deprives itself of the opportunity for intellectual growth, as even incorrect opinions can contribute to the understanding of truth by allowing it to be tested and clarified. This means that the silencing of any perspective, no matter how seemingly insignificant, is a loss for humanity as a whole. Mill emphasizes that openness to all ideas is crucial for the advancement of human knowledge and for fostering an environment where truth can emerge through debate and discussion. Quote 11. If all mankind minus one were of one opinion, and only one person were of the contrary opinion, mankind would be no more justified in silencing that one person than he, if he had the power, would be justified in silencing mankind. Mill highlights the importance of protecting even the most minority opinions. He emphasizes that truth does not derive its value from the number of adherents, but rather from its ability to withstand scrutiny and debate. The suppression of a lone voice, even when the majority stands against it, is unjustifiable because it assumes infallibility on the part of the majority. By allowing every perspective to be heard, society upholds the principles of free inquiry and respects the potential contribution of every individual to the collective understanding of truth. This passage underlines the value Mill places on individual liberty and intellectual humility in a society striving for progress. Quote 12. No one can be a great thinker who does not recognize that as a thinker, it is his first duty to follow his intellect to whatever conclusions it may lead. Mill emphasizes the importance of intellectual integrity, arguing that true greatness in thought requires a commitment to pursuing truth, even if it leads to uncomfortable or unpopular conclusions. He believes that genuine inquiry demands courage, the willingness to question established beliefs and explore new ideas without fear of social or personal consequences. This pursuit of truth, unencumbered by external pressures or internal biases, is essential not only for individual growth, but also for the collective advancement of society. Mill stresses that the suppression of free thought stunts intellectual progress, leading to stagnation rather than discovery. Quote 13. He who knows only his own side of the case knows little of that. Mill argues that understanding one's own beliefs fully requires being familiar with the arguments against them. A person who has never engaged with opposing viewpoints lacks a comprehensive understanding of even their own position. Mill believes that encountering challenges and counter-arguments allows individuals to better understand the validity and limitations of their beliefs. Without this process, one's convictions are based more on blind faith than reasoned understanding. By encouraging people to explore diverse perspectives, Mill highlights the importance of intellectual rigor and the necessity of testing one's beliefs to truly understand and justify them. Quote 14. The fatal tendency of mankind to leave off thinking about a thing when it is no longer doubtful is the cause of half their errors. Mill observes that once an idea becomes widely accepted and no longer questioned, people stop engaging with it critically. This cessation of thought leads to the gradual deterioration of understanding and the acceptance of the idea as a mere formality rather than a meaningful truth. Without ongoing debate, beliefs become stagnant, losing their relevance and impact on people's lives. Mill warns that genuine knowledge requires continual examination and discussion, even after an idea is accepted, to prevent it from becoming a hollow and ineffective doctrine. Quote 15. The Socratic dialectics, so magnificently exemplified in the dialogues of Plato, were a contrivance to convince anyone who had merely adopted the commonplaces of received opinion that he did not understand the subject. Mill praises the method of Socratic questioning, as seen in Plato's dialogues, for its ability to reveal the superficiality of unexamined beliefs. The dialectical method forces individuals to confront their own ignorance, pushing them to move beyond empty repetition of commonly accepted ideas and towards a genuine understanding of their beliefs. Mill sees this approach as essential for intellectual development, as it compels people to critically examine the foundations of their opinions, thus fostering deeper and more substantial beliefs. He laments the loss of such practices in modern education, arguing that, without them, true understanding is difficult to achieve. Quote 16. On any other subject, no one's opinions deserve the name of knowledge, except so far as he has either had forced upon him by others or gone through of himself the same mental process which would have been required of him in carrying on an active controversy with opponents. Mill emphasizes that genuine knowledge can only be obtained by actively engaging with opposing views. He suggests that true understanding arises from either being challenged by others or rigorously testing one's own beliefs as if in debate with an opponent. Without such engagement, what one holds is merely an opinion, not knowledge. Mill stresses that critical thinking and open dialogue are crucial for transforming opinions into well-founded knowledge. This approach not only ensures that beliefs are grounded in reason, but also helps individuals develop the capacity to defend their positions thoughtfully and effectively. Quote 17. When the conflicting doctrines share the truth between them, and the non-conforming opinion is needed to supply the remainder of the truth, of which the received doctrine embodies only a part. Mill argues that in many cases, neither the conventional belief nor its opposing viewpoint holds the entire truth. Instead, both contain partial truths that need to be reconciled to arrive at a more comprehensive understanding. He points out that it is through the clash of different perspectives that the complete truth emerges. By welcoming diverse viewpoints, society gains a fuller picture of complex issues. Mill underscores the importance of maintaining an environment where differing opinions are allowed to coexist and interact, as this is the only way to discover the whole truth and achieve balanced progress. Quote 18. In politics, again, it is almost a commonplace that a party of order or stability and a party of progress or reform are both necessary elements of a healthy state of political life. Mill asserts that a thriving political system requires the coexistence of both conservative and progressive forces. He believes that these opposing groups provide a balance, each serving to correct the excesses of the other. The Party of Order maintains stability and continuity, while the Party of Progress drives necessary change and adaptation. This dynamic tension ensures that political life is responsive to new challenges without losing its foundational values. Mill stresses that only through the interplay of these forces can a society achieve a balanced and healthy state, where both preservation and improvement are valued equally. Quote 19. It is desirable, in short, that in things which do not primarily concern others, individuality should assert itself. Mill argues that individuality should be encouraged and valued in matters that primarily concern only the individual. He sees this as crucial not only for personal happiness, but also for societal progress. When people are allowed to experiment with different ways of living, society as a whole benefits from the diversity of experiences and the practical demonstration of the worth of various lifestyles. Mill believes that individual choices, even those that deviate from norms, contribute to a richer and more vibrant society. By asserting their individuality, people create opportunities for growth, both for themselves and for the community at large. Quote 20. He who lets the world, or his own portion of it, choose his plan of life for him, has no need of any other faculty than the ape-like one of imitation. Mill highlights the importance of personal choice and the development of one's own faculties. He suggests that those who allow society or convention to dictate their lives miss out on the opportunity to fully engage their intellect, judgment, and creativity. Instead, they merely imitate others, relying on habit rather than making conscious, deliberate decisions. Mill argues that true human fulfillment comes from actively shaping one's life, which requires critical thinking and the exercise of one's unique abilities. By choosing for oneself, a person becomes an active participant in life, rather than a passive follower, leading to a richer and more meaningful existence. Quote 21. Human nature is not a machine to be built after a model and set to do exactly the work prescribed for it, but a tree which requires to grow and develop itself on all sides, according to the tendency of the inward forces which make it a living thing. Mill uses the metaphor of a tree to emphasize the importance of allowing human beings to grow and develop naturally, in contrast to the mechanical conformity imposed by societal expectations. He believes that each person has unique potential that must be nurtured according to their individual inclinations and capabilities. Unlike a machine, which follows a fixed plan, human beings require freedom to explore experiment, and flourish in their own ways. Mill's argument here underscores the value of individuality and self-determination as essential elements of a well-lived life, where people can realize their fullest potential without being forced into predefined molds. Quote 22. It is not because men's desires are strong that they act ill. It is because their consciences are weak. Mill contends that the problem in human behavior does not lie in the strength of people's desires, but rather in the weakness of their moral conscience. He argues that strong desires are not inherently dangerous or harmful. Instead, they can be powerful forces for good if they are accompanied by a well-developed conscience and sense of responsibility. The key is not to suppress impulses, but to cultivate a strong ethical foundation that guides these impulses toward positive ends. Mill believes that a society that values both individual freedom and moral development will produce people who are capable of great good, using their energy and passion constructively. Quote 23. In proportion as the development of his individuality, each person becomes more valuable to himself, and is therefore capable of being more valuable to others. Mill asserts that as individuals develop their unique capacities and express their individuality, they become not only more fulfilled and valuable to themselves, but also more capable of contributing to society. A person who is fully developed in their individuality has a richer experience of life and can offer more to others, whether through creativity, insight, or service. Mill believes that allowing people to explore and cultivate their distinct talents and preferences benefits everyone, as it enhances the collective well-being and makes society more diverse, dynamic, and resourceful. Individual development, therefore, has both personal and social value. Quote 24. Originality is the one thing which unoriginal minds cannot feel the use of. Mill argues that those who lack originality are often unable to see its value. People who follow conventional ways of thinking may not understand why originality matters because they have never experienced the transformative power of new ideas. Mill suggests that the first service originality provides is opening people's eyes to new possibilities, helping them to see beyond the boundaries of what they have always known. By doing so, originality gives people the opportunity to break free from conformity and develop their own ideas and perspectives. This is a crucial element for personal and societal progress. Quote 25. The initiation of all wise or noble things comes and must come from individuals, generally at first from some one individual. Mill emphasizes that true progress, whether in society, politics, or any other field, begins with the actions and ideas of individuals. Collective efforts and the wisdom of the masses can follow, but it is always the exceptional vision of one person that leads the way. Mill recognizes the importance of the average man in supporting and following noble causes, but stresses that the creative spark of innovation must come from those who think independently. This underscores the essential role of individual leadership and creativity in advancing civilization, and highlights why protecting individuality is vital for fostering new ideas and positive change. Quote 26. Eccentricity has always abounded when and where strength of character has abounded. Mill points out that eccentricity is often a sign of strength of character, as it reflects a person's willingness to be different and stand by their own beliefs, even in the face of societal pressure. He argues that societies with a high level of individuality and creativity have always tolerated a certain amount of eccentricity, as it is a natural byproduct of having people who think independently and refuse to conform to prevailing norms. Conversely, the lack of eccentricity in a society may indicate a lack of creativity, courage, and original thought, which Mill views as a significant danger in modern times. Quote 27. There is no reason that all human existences should be constructed on someone or some small number of patterns. Mill argues that there is no justification for forcing all people to live according to the same model or a limited set of ideals. He believes that the diversity of human nature necessitates a diversity of ways of living. Just as people have different tastes, they also have different needs for their personal and spiritual growth. Imposing uniformity stifles individuality and prevents people from developing to their full potential. Mill advocates for allowing people the freedom to choose their own paths in life, as this leads to richer, more fulfilled individuals and a more vibrant society that benefits from a wide range of experiences and perspectives. Quote 28. The despotism of custom is everywhere the standing hindrance to human advancement. Mill asserts that rigid adherence to custom is a major obstacle to human progress. The tyranny of tradition suppresses the spirit of liberty, innovation, and improvement, which are essential for societal growth. He acknowledges that while customs can provide stability, they also have the potential to stifle creativity and prevent people from seeking better ways of doing things. Mill emphasizes that the struggle between the forces of custom and the desire for progress is central to human history. For societies to advance, individuals must challenge established norms and pursue new ideas, breaking free from the constraints imposed by the unquestioning acceptance of tradition. Quote 29. To individuality should belong the part of life in which it is chiefly the individual that is interested. To society, the part which chiefly interests society. Mill argues that the proper boundary between individual freedom and societal authority lies in the distinction between personal interests and collective concerns. He believes that individuals should have full autonomy in matters that primarily affect themselves, while society may legitimately exert authority over actions that impact the welfare of others. By maintaining this balance, both individuality and social well-being are respected. Mill underscores that, for a harmonious society, the individual must be free to make choices in personal matters, as this freedom is crucial for personal development and fulfillment, whereas societal intervention is only warranted when broader interests are at stake. Quote 30. The interference of society to overrule his judgment and purposes in what only regards himself must be grounded on general presumptions, which may be altogether wrong. Mill argues that when society tries to overrule an individual's personal decisions, it often relies on generalized assumptions that may be incorrect. He points out that every person is best positioned to understand their own needs, circumstances, and preferences, and thus should have the freedom to make decisions affecting their personal welfare. When society imposes its judgment on personal matters, it risks making mistakes due to a lack of understanding of individual contexts. Mill emphasizes that allowing individuals to make their own choices, even if they err, is better than allowing society to make potentially misguided decisions on their behalf. Quote 31. A person could not have the opposite qualities in due strength without entertaining these feelings. Mill suggests that it is natural and even necessary for individuals to form opinions about others based on their personal qualities or deficiencies, particularly when it comes to self-regarding actions. He believes that a person who strives to cultivate virtues like prudence and self-respect will inevitably feel distaste or even contempt for those who lack these qualities. Mill argues that this judgment is an inherent part of human interaction, and that expressing such feelings can serve as a useful reminder to others about the potential consequences of their actions. However, these judgments should not lead to deliberate harm or punishment, but rather serve as a reflection of natural social dynamics. Quote 32. Acts injurious to others require a totally different treatment. Mill draws a clear distinction between actions that harm only the individual and those that harm others. While he believes that individuals should be free to make decisions about their own lives, he emphasizes that society has a responsibility to intervene when someone's actions cause harm to others. In such cases, moral disapprobation, punishment, or legal intervention may be justified to protect the rights and well-being of others. Mill argues that while individuals should be allowed to make their own mistakes in matters that concern only themselves, actions that infringe on the rights of others must be subject to societal control to maintain justice and social harmony. Quote 33. To extend the bounds of what may be called moral police until it encroaches on the most unquestionably legitimate liberty of the individual is one of the most universal of all human propensities. Mill argues that people have a strong tendency to expand the reach of societal control over individual behavior, even when it infringes upon fundamental personal freedoms. He highlights how the majority often tries to impose its values on others, believing it has the right to dictate what is morally acceptable. This imposition can lead to severe restrictions on legitimate personal choices that do not harm others. Mill warns that this universal impulse to control and judge others' behaviors, especially in matters that concern only the individual, poses a significant threat to individual liberty. Quote 34. The only tenable ground of condemnation would be that with the personal tastes and self-regarding concerns of individuals, the public has no business to interfere. Mill emphasizes that society should have no authority to interfere with individual choices that are purely personal and do not harm others. He uses examples of cultural and religious practices, such as dietary restrictions, to illustrate how irrational it is for one group to impose its preferences on another when those preferences only affect the individual involved. Mill argues that the legitimate boundary for public interference ends where self-regarding actions begin, as personal choices regarding one's own life do not warrant public control or condemnation. This principle safeguards individual freedom by preventing the overreach of societal power into private matters. Quote 35. How will the remaining portion of the community like to have the amusements that shall be permitted to them regulated by the religious and moral sentiments of the stricter Calvinists and Methodists? Mill points out the dangers of allowing any specific group to dictate the moral standards of an entire community. He raises the hypothetical scenario of a society dominated by strict religious groups, like Calvinists or Methodists, imposing their standards on everyone else, such as prohibiting amusements like music and dancing. Mill questions how the rest of the community would react to having their personal freedoms restricted based on the beliefs of a strict minority. He argues that no group should have the authority to impose its values on others, as this infringes on individual liberty and leads to an unjust society where the preferences of a few dominate the lives of many. Quote 36. If the public have any jurisdiction over private concerns, I cannot see that these people are in fault, or that any individual's particular public can be blamed for asserting the same authority over his individual conduct, which the general public asserts over people in general. Mill argues that if society claims the right to interfere in private matters, it opens the door for smaller groups within society to assert similar authority over individual conduct. He uses examples like workers demanding equal wages regardless of skill to illustrate the absurdity of allowing public opinion to dictate private actions. Mill warns that if the principle of societal interference is accepted, it can be extended indefinitely, leading to unjust and oppressive behavior even within smaller communities. This logic demonstrates the dangers of allowing any public authority over individual autonomy, as it inevitably leads to an erosion of personal freedoms. Quote 37. The strongest of all the arguments against the interference of the public with purely personal conduct is that when it does interfere, the odds are that it interferes wrongly, and in the wrong place. Mill asserts that public interference in private conduct is likely to be misguided. He believes that individuals understand their own needs and circumstances better than anyone else, whereas public opinion is often influenced by prejudice, misinformation, or a lack of understanding. When society imposes its views on personal matters, it risks making harmful decisions that undermine individual well-being. Mill stresses that respecting individual autonomy is crucial because individuals are usually the best judges of their own lives. Allowing societal control over personal choices often leads to errors that can negatively affect people's happiness and freedom. Quote 38. The individual is not accountable to society for his actions, insofar as these concern the interests of no person but himself. Mill argues that individuals should have the freedom to act according to their own will, provided their actions do not harm others. He asserts that society should not interfere in personal matters that do not directly impact the well-being of others. Instead of using coercion or punishment, society can only use methods such as advice, instruction, or avoidance to express disapproval of an individual's actions when those actions affect only the person in question. Mill believes that this principle is crucial for protecting personal liberty and fostering an environment where individuals can explore, learn, and grow without undue external constraints. Quote 39. In many cases, an individual, in pursuing a legitimate object, necessarily and therefore legitimately causes pain or loss to others. Mill acknowledges that pursuing personal success or goals can often cause indirect harm or disappointment to others, such as in competitive situations. However, he argues that this kind of harm is not a valid reason for societal interference because it is an unavoidable part of life in a functioning society. The benefits of allowing people to strive freely for their goals outweigh the costs of the disappointment that others may feel when they do not succeed. According to Mill, as long as individuals pursue their interests honestly, without fraud or force, society should accept such outcomes as a natural consequence of competition and personal ambition. Quote 40. It is one of the undisputed functions of government to take precautions against crime before it has been committed, as well as to detect and punish it afterwards. Mill discusses the role of government in preventing crime, noting that it is legitimate for authorities to take preventive measures when they see clear evidence of a crime about to be committed. However, he also warns that preventive action is prone to abuse, as it can easily infringe upon legitimate personal freedoms. The challenge lies in balancing the need for public safety with the preservation of individual liberty. Mill believes that preventive measures are justified only when there is an imminent and obvious danger, but they should not be extended to restrict individuals' rights based on mere suspicion or remote possibilities, as this could lead to widespread and unjustified violations of personal freedoms. Quote 41. The making himself drunk in a person whom drunkenness excites to do harm to others is a crime against others. Mill argues that actions such as drunkenness are generally self-regarding and should not be subject to legal punishment. However, when an individual has a history of becoming violent or harming others while intoxicated, their drunkenness can no longer be considered purely personal. In such cases, Mill believes it is legitimate for the state to impose restrictions or penalties because the individual's behavior poses a threat to others. This perspective highlights Mill's principle that individual freedoms should be protected as long as they do not lead to harm to others, and that society has the right to intervene when such harm is a probable outcome. Quote 42. It still remains unrecognized that to bring a child into existence without a fair prospect of being able to provide food for its body, but instruction and training for its mind, is a moral crime, both against the unfortunate offspring and against society. Mill argues that having children without the means to ensure their well-being is a moral wrong, not only to the children, but also to society. He stresses that parents have an obligation not only to provide basic physical needs like food, but also to ensure that their children receive an adequate education that prepares them for life. Mill believes that if parents fail to fulfill this responsibility, the state should intervene to make sure the child receives a proper upbringing, even if it means placing the financial burden on the parent. By emphasizing this point, Mill highlights the need for society to take a more active role in ensuring children are given opportunities for growth and development, recognizing this as a duty owed to both the individual child and the community. Quote 43. The objections which are urged with reason against state education do not apply to the enforcement of education by the state, but to the state's taking upon itself to direct that education. Mill makes a distinction between the enforcement of compulsory education and the direct provision of education by the state. He supports the idea that the state should mandate education for all children, but argues against the state taking full control over the educational content. Mill believes that while it is the state's duty to ensure every child is educated, it is equally important that parents have the freedom to choose how and where their children are educated. This distinction is crucial for maintaining individuality and preventing the homogenization of thought that can occur if a single authority dictates the entire educational process. Quote 44. The worth of a state, in the long run, is the worth of the individuals composing it. Mill asserts that the true measure of a state's success lies in the development and quality of its citizens. He warns against any state system that sacrifices the growth of individual potential for the sake of administrative efficiency or centralized control. By prioritizing the expansion and elevation of individuals, a society can achieve greatness, as it relies on the vitality and creativity of its citizens. Mill argues that a state that seeks to create passive, obedient citizens may achieve short-term order, but it will ultimately fail to reach its true potential because it has stifled the very force, individual human capability, that drives innovation and meaningful progress. Interferences, quote 45, with an individual's liberty can be justified only to prevent him from harming others, never merely for his own good. Mill's harm principle asserts that the only legitimate reason for society or the government to interfere with an individual's freedom is to prevent harm to others. This means that a person should be free to make choices about their own life, even if those choices may not be in their best interest or may lead to negative consequences for themselves. Mill argues that each person is the best judge of what is right for them, and that individual autonomy should be respected unless it poses a clear risk to others. This principle is fundamental to Mill's concept of liberty, as it places strict limits on the power of society to impose its values on individuals, thereby ensuring that personal freedom is protected as much as possible. Quote 46. A general state education is a mere contrivance for molding people to be exactly like one another. Mill critiques state-controlled education for its tendency to create conformity, rather than encouraging individuality and diversity. He argues that a uniform education system designed and controlled by the state molds individuals according to the values of those in power, effectively suppressing independent thought and creativity. Mill believes that true education should foster individuality and that allowing for diversity in educational approaches is essential for personal development and social progress. He is wary of the state's influence in shaping minds, as it risks creating a society of people who think and behave in the same way, stifling the variety of perspectives and ideas that are crucial for a vibrant and dynamic community. Quote 47. Mill wrote on liberty to foster our individuality, even to the point of eccentricity, and to attack the forces that drive us to conformity. Mill's primary aim in writing On Liberty was to champion the value of individuality, even if that means encouraging eccentric behavior, as long as it is authentic. He was concerned about the increasing tendency towards conformity in society, which he saw as a major threat to personal freedom and human development. Mill believed that individuality is essential not only for personal happiness, but also for societal progress, as unique perspectives foster creativity and enrich the social fabric. By resisting the pressures to conform, individuals contribute to a more dynamic and vibrant community, which is essential for human flourishing. Quote 48. No one pretends that actions should be as free as opinions. Mill distinguishes between the freedom to hold and express opinions and the freedom to act on those opinions. While he argues that individuals should have absolute freedom in forming and expressing their views, he acknowledges that actions stemming from those views may need to be restricted, especially if they could harm others. Mill believes that free expression is fundamental to personal growth and societal progress, but he also recognizes that actions can have direct, tangible consequences that justify regulation. This distinction underscores the importance of protecting intellectual freedom while allowing for reasonable limits on behavior that may infringe on the rights or safety of others. Quote 49. The principle of freedom cannot require that he should be free not to be free. Mill asserts that the principle of freedom cannot justify an individual's decision to permanently relinquish their own liberty, such as by selling themselves into slavery. He believes that the purpose of liberty is to enable individuals to continually make choices about their own lives. By surrendering their freedom entirely, individuals would undermine their capacity to make future decisions, which contradicts the very essence of liberty. Mill's argument highlights the need to preserve an individual's autonomy and prevent irreversible decisions that eliminate the ability to act freely, thereby safeguarding the core value of personal freedom. Quote 50. The sole end for which mankind are warranted, individually or collectively, in interfering with the liberty of action of any of their number is self-protection, that is, to prevent harm to others. Mill's principle of liberty asserts that the only legitimate reason for society to interfere with an individual's freedom is to prevent harm to others. This concept underpins his entire argument in On Liberty, emphasizing that individual autonomy should be respected as long as it does not infringe upon the well-being of others. Mill draws a clear distinction between actions that affect only the individual and those that have consequences for others. By setting this boundary, he aims to protect personal freedom from unwarranted interference by both the government and public opinion, which he views as potentially more oppressive than state control. Mill's principle underscores the importance of allowing individuals to live according to their own choices, as this autonomy is crucial for personal development and societal progress. Quote 51. Mill's concept of liberty is thus intended to protect the individual from both well-meaning and hostile interferences with his autonomy. Mill's notion of liberty is designed to shield individuals from interference, whether it comes from well-intentioned efforts to improve their lives or from hostile attempts to control them. He argues that individuals should not be coerced, even if others believe they know what is best for them, as autonomy is essential for personal growth and self-realization. Mill is concerned with both governmental and societal interference, particularly the pressure of public opinion, which can stifle individuality and force conformity. By protecting personal autonomy, Mill aims to create a society where individuals can pursue their own paths, free from the imposition of others' values, thereby fostering a richer and more diverse social environment. Quote 52. Mill thought that the right goal for human beings was not simple happiness or contentment, but rather the fullest expression of our distinctive powers. Mill diverges from traditional utilitarianism, which emphasizes maximizing happiness, by arguing that the true goal of human life is the full development of one's unique abilities and potential. He believes that individuality and self-expression are essential for achieving a fulfilling and meaningful existence. Mill's concept of liberty is therefore aimed at creating an environment where people can explore and cultivate their unique talents and perspectives, rather than simply seeking contentment. This approach underscores the importance of personal growth and creativity, and highlights why freedom of thought, expression, and action are vital for both individual well-being and societal progress. Under quote 53, undergirding both freedom of expression and liberty of conduct is the idea that intellectual and social progress is impossible without experimentation. Mill argues that freedom of thought, expression, and action are all crucial for the advancement of society, as progress can only occur through experimentation and diversity. He believes that allowing individuals to explore different ways of living, even if those ways are unconventional or unpopular, is essential for discovering new ideas and better ways of doing things. This process of experimentation and innovation is what drives intellectual and social progress, benefiting society as a whole. Mill emphasizes that restricting individual freedom stifles this experimentation, leading to stagnation rather than growth. By protecting liberty, society encourages a diversity of experiences and perspectives, which ultimately leads to greater knowledge and improvement. Quote 54. Mill's conception of liberty of conduct was broader in excluding intangible externalities, notably offensiveness, from the domain of permissible infringements of liberty. Mill takes a firm stance against restricting individual liberty based on mere offensiveness. He argues that actions which cause no tangible harm, even if they are offensive to others, should not be subject to societal interference. Mill believes that allowing people to live freely, despite the possibility of offending others, is crucial for fostering individuality and encouraging a diversity of lifestyles. He differentiates between tangible harms, such as physical or financial damage, and intangible harms, such as moral offense, and asserts that only the former justifies intervention. This approach ensures that personal freedom is not unduly limited by subjective judgments about morality or taste, thereby preserving the space for personal exploration and unconventional choices. Quote 55. If anything approaches a sacred principle for Mill, it is that the individual is entirely sovereign. Over himself, over his own body and mind, the individual is sovereign. Mill's emphasis on the sovereignty of the individual forms the foundation of his philosophy on liberty. He argues that every person should have complete authority over their own thoughts, actions, and body, provided that their actions do not harm others. This assertion is central to Mill's harm principle, which aims to protect individual autonomy from both governmental and social interference. However, Mill's application of this principle is not without exceptions. He concedes that children and those in backward states of society do not qualify for this kind of freedom, as they are deemed incapable of exercising autonomy responsibly. This qualification introduces tension in his argument, as it raises questions about who gets to decide when someone is ready for self-sovereignty, and how this determination might be used to justify despotism. Despite these complexities, Mill's ideal remains the pursuit of a society where individuals are free to pursue their own paths without external constraints, except in cases where their actions might cause direct harm to others. Quote 56. Mill's oppositions are harsh, either individualistic self-sovereignty or despotism. Mill presents a dichotomy between individual liberty and despotism, which lacks nuance in its approach to authority. He implies that any restriction on personal freedom, unless justified by the harm principle, amounts to tyranny. This stark opposition does not leave room for legitimate forms of authority that might contribute positively to societal structure, such as parental authority or institutional leadership. Mill's framing fails to acknowledge the complexity of authority, which can exist in forms that are neither despotic nor oppressive, but rather supportive of individual growth and community well-being. By equating authority with tyranny, Mill overlooks the possibility of constructive forms of leadership that do not infringe on personal liberty, but instead help individuals achieve their potential. This simplification of authority limits the applicability of his arguments to real-world contexts, where various types of authority coexist and contribute to a functioning society. Quote 57. Mill assumes that those who would suppress a view or deny it full airing must be assuming their own infallibility. Mill argues that suppressing any opinion is an act of assuming infallibility, as it denies the possibility that the suppressed view might hold some truth. He believes that open debate is essential for reaching the truth, as it allows for the examination of all perspectives, even those that initially seem erroneous. Mill's fallibilist stance implies that no one can be certain enough of their correctness to justify silencing others. However, this argument is not without its challenges. Mill's insistence on giving every opinion a platform does not take into account the fact that some views may be harmful or devoid of rational merit. His optimism that truth will ultimately prevail in a fair contest of ideas overlooks the potential for misinformation or harmful ideologies to take root, especially when they are given the same legitimacy as well-founded arguments. Despite this, Mill's emphasis on the dangers of assuming infallibility serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of humility and openness in the pursuit of knowledge. Quote 58. Mill is unwilling or unable to conjure with the possibility that authority and autonomy not only need not be put into opposition, but might instead be mutually constitutive. Mill's analysis of authority and autonomy sets them in opposition, suggesting that authority inherently limits individual freedom. However, this view fails to consider that authority can sometimes enable autonomy by providing the structure and support needed for individuals to make informed and meaningful choices. For example, educational institutions parental guidance, and community leaders can help individuals develop the skills and knowledge required for independent decision-making. Mill's rigid separation of authority from autonomy does not account for the ways in which constructive forms of authority can foster individual growth and self-determination. By viewing authority solely as a threat to liberty, Mill overlooks the potential for positive authority relationships that empower individuals rather than constrain them. This perspective limits the scope of his argument, as it does not fully explore the complex and often beneficial interplay between authority and personal freedom. Mill's quote 59. Drive to confine this discussion to liberty versus power, however, places women in an impossible bind. Mill's binary framing of liberty versus power creates difficulties when applied to the issue of gender equality. He argues that women's pursuit of power within the domestic sphere results from their lack of liberty, implying that once public liberty is granted, the desire for private power would disappear. This oversimplifies the dynamics of gender relations and ignores the complex ways in which power operates within both public and private spheres. By equating power with something inherently negative, Mill fails to recognize that the struggle for power can be a legitimate and necessary part of achieving equality. Women's historical fight for rights was not merely about attaining liberty, but also about gaining authority and influence in both public and private realms. Mill's approach does not fully acknowledge the need for women to have both autonomy and authority, which are essential for true equality. This limitation in his argument reflects a broader issue in his treatment of power and liberty, where the pursuit of power is often viewed with suspicion rather than as a potential means of achieving justice and equity. Quote 60. Mill would resist this conclusion by putting opinion to the test in light of his overarching telos of what counts as humankind's improvement, the increase of liberty over authority. Mill's ultimate goal is to ensure that liberty prevails over authority, and this aim guides his approach to testing opinions. He believes that the improvement of humanity depends on expanding personal freedom and reducing the influence of authority. By subjecting opinions to open debate and allowing them to be tested publicly, Mill aims to promote a process of continuous self-improvement for individuals and society. He sees the increase of liberty as the primary measure of human progress, and he regards the role of authority with suspicion, often equating it with a barrier to such progress. However, this perspective tends to overlook the possible constructive roles that authority can play in fostering environments where liberty can thrive, and it simplifies the relationship between power and individual autonomy. Quote 61. Mill offers us no way to adjudicate true from false opinion, save to assess its utility. Mill suggests that the truth of an opinion can only be determined by its utility, its practical benefit to society. This utilitarian approach to determining the value of an opinion places emphasis on how well an idea serves the collective good, rather than considering intrinsic qualities like coherence or consistency with established facts. While Mill champions the free exchange of ideas as essential to the discovery of truth, his reliance on utility as the ultimate criterion for truth leaves room for ambiguity, as what is useful to one group may be harmful to another. Moreover, assessing utility is inherently subjective, and this makes it difficult to arrive at an objective standard for determining the value of competing opinions. Mill's approach highlights a tension in his philosophy between promoting absolute freedom of thought and expression and the need for some basis to distinguish between valuable and harmful ideas. Mill quote 62. Mill's simultaneous insistence that all opinions have the same right to a public airing and that 99% of people haven't the wherewithal to engage in truth-finding disputation, it is more difficult to square the circle. Mill's argument is inconsistent in that he advocates for the equal right of all opinions to be heard, while simultaneously doubting the ability of the majority to engage meaningfully in truth-seeking debate. He believes in the importance of public discourse for arriving at the truth, yet he also expresses skepticism about the intellectual capacity of most people to participate effectively in such discussions. This creates a paradox. If the majority are not equipped to evaluate ideas critically, then the value of granting all opinions equal weight becomes questionable. Mill's ideal of open debate is thus undermined by his own doubts about the public's ability to discern truth from falsehood. This tension raises questions about how to balance the principle of free expression with the need to ensure that public discourse leads to meaningful and informed outcomes, rather than confusion or misinformation. Quote 63. Mill cannot permit any appeal to intense attachments, for these are used only to justify slavery of one sort or another. Mill is wary of intense emotional attachments because he views them as potential justifications for oppressive relationships. He fears that such attachments can lead to situations where individuals lose their autonomy and become subject to the will of others, as in the case of traditional family roles that enforce gender inequality. By rejecting appeals to deep emotional bonds, Mill aims to protect individual liberty from the constraints that often accompany intense personal relationships. However, this perspective overlooks the possibility that such attachments can also be sources of deep fulfillment and moral growth. Love, loyalty, and other strong emotional ties can play a vital role in human development, fostering empathy and ethical behavior. Mill's rigid focus on autonomy as the highest good leads him to dismiss these complex aspects of human relationships, thereby presenting a somewhat impoverished view of the emotional dimensions of human life. Mill's quote 64. Anthropology is a dualism of a particular kind. Its origins seem Manichaean. Mill's understanding of human nature is characterized by a dualistic view, similar to the ancient Manichaean perspective, which sees the world in terms of a struggle between good and evil. For Mill, this dualism manifests as a stark division between reason and passion, with reason being the force that must dominate for progress to occur. He tends to view bodily desires and instincts as inherently negative, while rationality is held up as the path to human improvement and moral elevation. This perspective leads Mill to advocate for the suppression of natural instincts in favor of cultivating reason, which he believes will lead to more equitable and enlightened human relationships. However, this view simplifies the complexity of human nature and ignores the ways in which reason and passion can coexist and even complement one another. By framing human nature in such rigid terms, Mill fails to account for the rich interplay between emotion and intellect that shapes much of human experience and gives depth to our moral and social lives. Quote 65. Mill traces the dominant source of tyranny in society from rule by the few, through democratic rule by the many, the tyranny of the majority, to the informal tyranny of society. Mill's analysis of tyranny evolves from examining autocratic rule to democratic governance, and ultimately to the informal yet pervasive oppression exerted by societal norms. He argues that modern society no longer faces tyranny primarily through government actions, but rather through the immense social pressure imposed by collective public opinion. This social tyranny is often more insidious than formal political oppression, as it penetrates deeply into the personal lives of individuals, constraining their behavior and limiting their ability to express themselves authentically. Mill's concern is that the fear of social disapproval creates a form of internal censorship that is difficult to resist, thereby stifling individuality and innovation. He emphasizes the importance of maintaining a strong barrier of moral conviction against such societal encroachments, as this is just as crucial for human well-being as protection against political despotism. Quote 66. Mill is concerned, we know, with liberty of opinion and lifestyle. But if we read him as a critic of culture, then we have to understand that his book is also a critique of contemporary opinion and lifestyle. Mill's work, when read as a critique of culture rather than merely a political treatise, reveals a deeper disapproval of the values and practices of his contemporary society. He is not only advocating for the freedom of individual expression, but also challenging the prevailing cultural norms that pressure people into conformity. Mill views the dominant moralistic and improvement-driven attitudes of society as repressive, particularly towards those with unconventional opinions or lifestyles. His goal is to establish a boundary that limits the interference of collective opinion in the lives of individuals, thereby allowing a diversity of thoughts and behaviors to flourish. This cultural critique highlights Mill's broader concern with the homogenizing forces of his time, which he believed stifled creativity, personal growth, and genuine individuality. Quote 67. Mill is intensely interested in the social processes whereby preferences, opinions, and plans of life are generated. Mill is deeply concerned with how social pressures shape individuals' preferences and choices, often in ways that discourage self-reflection and personal authenticity. He critiques the way people tend to conform to societal expectations without questioning whether these norms align with their true desires or interests. Instead of making independent decisions, people are conditioned to follow what is customary, relying on social cues rather than introspection. Mill's interest lies in challenging this process, as he believes that the generation of preferences should involve thoughtful consideration of what genuinely benefits one's character and potential. By advocating for individuals to be conscious of their choices, Mill seeks to foster a society that values diversity of thought and individuality, rather than one where people merely imitate what is socially acceptable. Quote 68. Mill doubted very much whether this adversarial ideal could be approximated by actual social conditions in England. Mill is skeptical about the effectiveness of the marketplace of ideas in contemporary England. He recognizes that the ideal of truth emerging through the open clash of opposing views is not easily realized under the current social conditions, which are characterized by superficial engagement with ideas and a lack of meaningful debate. The rapid consumption of information, coupled with the reluctance of individuals to deeply engage with challenging or unfamiliar ideas, undermines the possibility of genuine intellectual progress. Mill worries that the culture of his time, which favors quick judgments and popular consensus over critical analysis, will prevent the kind of rigorous debate necessary for truth to prevail. This skepticism reflects Mill's broader concern with the quality of public discourse and the detrimental effects of social complacency on intellectual development. Quote 69. Mill's response to this social conformism is not simply a normative individualism. Mill's response to the pervasive social conformism of his time goes beyond simply urging individuals to be more independent. He acknowledges the natural human desire for social connection and the deep-seated need to belong, which makes resisting conformity particularly challenging. Instead of merely advocating for individualism, Mill seeks to foster a societal appreciation for diversity and individuality. He believes that the value of individuality must be recognized and cultivated within the social framework, rather than expecting individuals to resist social pressure on their own. By highlighting the importance of social acceptance of differences, Mill aims to create an environment where people feel encouraged to develop their unique talents and perspectives, rather than succumbing to the homogenizing forces of social conformity. This nuanced approach underscores Mill's understanding of the complexities of human sociability and the need for collective efforts to protect personal freedom. Quote 70. Mill suggests that things may be different if Queensberry goes out of his way to ensure that Wilde is denied employment or assistance. Mill argues that while individuals are not obligated to provide support to others, it becomes an issue when someone deliberately takes steps to harm another's opportunities. In the context of Wilde and Queensberry, Mill believes that while Queensberry has the right to prefer others over Wilde in terms of social or economic favors, it crosses a line if he actively works to undermine Wilde's ability to find employment or gain support. Such actions would constitute an abuse of social influence, turning it into a tool for coercion rather than a mere expression of personal preference. Mill's concern is that deliberate exclusion and punitive behavior lead to a form of societal tyranny that aims to force individuals into conformity, thereby stifling their personal freedom and ability to pursue their own path in life. Quote 71. Mill tries to save the position by insisting that a distinction must be drawn between Queensberry's punishing Wilde and Wilde's experiencing social penalties, only insofar as they are the natural, and, as it were, the spontaneous consequences of the faults themselves. Mill attempts to make a distinction between consequences that arise naturally from one's actions and those that are artificially imposed as punishment. He argues that if Wilde suffers social disapproval because of his behavior, such disapproval is acceptable as long as it is a spontaneous response rather than a coordinated effort to punish or ostracize him. This distinction is intended to protect individual liberty, while acknowledging that actions can have consequences in terms of how others perceive and respond to them. However, the line between natural consequences and intentional punishment is often blurred, as social disapproval can easily transform into targeted exclusion. Mill's argument highlights the difficulty of protecting individuality in a society where personal judgments can quickly escalate into collective efforts to impose conformity, thereby complicating the balance between individual freedom and social influence. Quote 72. Mill is trying to make us solicitous of individuality, trying to teach us to care about it, in cases where we might otherwise be careless. Mill's purpose in On Liberty is to cultivate an appreciation for individuality, encouraging society to protect and value it even when it may be inconvenient or unconventional. He aims to raise awareness of the importance of allowing people to pursue their unique paths without interference, especially in instances where social norms might lead to thoughtless condemnation or exclusion. Mill believes that individuality is crucial for both personal development and societal progress, and he wants people to be mindful of the impact their actions may have on the freedom of others. By urging society to be considerate and supportive of diverse ways of living, Mill seeks to create an environment where individuals can thrive without fearing social backlash for being different. Quote 73. Mill reckons that Queensberry has to be allowed to have and express distaste for Wilde's values. As he puts it, a person could not have the opposite qualities in due strength without entertaining these feelings. Mill acknowledges that individuals like Queensberry have the right to feel and express disapproval of others' values, as these feelings are part of their moral makeup. He recognizes that having strong moral convictions naturally involves disliking qualities that one finds objectionable in others. However, Mill draws a line between expressing distaste and actively punishing someone for their values. He believes that while people should be free to hold and voice their opinions, this freedom should not extend to actions that aim to socially or economically penalize others for their choices. Mill's stance highlights the complexity of balancing freedom of expression with the need to protect individuals from the coercive power of social disapproval, emphasizing that the exercise of personal values should not infringe upon the rights of others to live according to their own beliefs. Quote 74. Mill suggests we may be able to influence public opinion in a more liberal direction, so that the morality of the masses becomes in some sense, at least partly, a liberal morality. Mill hopes to shape public opinion towards embracing liberal values, such as the importance of individuality and tolerance for diverse lifestyles. He believes that if the more educated and thoughtful members of society adopt and advocate for these values, they can gradually influence the broader public to become more open-minded and accepting of differences. Mill's goal is to create a culture where the morality of the masses aligns more closely with liberal principles, fostering an environment in which individual freedom is respected and social pressure to conform is minimized. By encouraging a shift in societal attitudes, Mill aims to reduce the power of social tyranny and ensure that people feel free to pursue their own unique paths without fear of judgment or repression. On Liberty by John Stuart Mill leaves readers with a profound reminder of the delicate balance between authority and personal freedom. Mill emphasizes that individual autonomy is not just about pursuing one's desires, but is also an essential component of a thriving society. He highlights the vital role of diverse opinions and lifestyles in challenging conformity, fostering debate, and ensuring that societies remain dynamic rather than stagnant. Ultimately, Mill urges us to respect and nurture individuality as the foundation of human dignity, warning against the stifling effects of societal pressure and emphasizing the need for constant vigilance to protect the liberties that enable human development.
Curious to dive into the mind of John Stuart Mill? With StudyLab Pro's book GPT, it's possible. Ask questions, explore themes, and discover the depths of On Liberty in an entirely new way. Start your conversation now by clicking on our logo. And if you're hungry for more educational content, subscribe to our channel to keep discovering, learning, and growing. Want more than just videos? Click on our logo now to join us on our platform for multiple choice tests, in-depth content, and tools to help you ace your studies. Get started now.